What's up, everyone? Welcome into the Dear Miss Fantasy show with me, your host, Tera Roberts. This is the official mailbag show for Player Profiler. It is Wednesday, August 27th. I am taking your questions live as always, and we're going to dive right in because this week's topic is last minute draft tips to help you crush your fantasy draft, because this is it, guys. We need a cram session. This is the last draft episode of the season. I'm low-key kind of sad here because this has been fun. I'm already kind of craving the off season. I hate to say that, but off season is low-key kind of fun for me. But yeah, next time we talk next week, it'll be week 1. We'll be talking start sits, waivers, trades. This is our last chance to dive into draft strategy for 2025. So ask your questions away. I've got some mailbag questions in here as well. And by the way, I would like to welcome in a potentially new audience here. This is the first time that I am streaming also on my YouTube channel. So if you're looking at this and you're like, am I jumping in the middle of a podcast? You are. We've been going for a couple of years now here. And I guess 3, I don't know. Yeah, I think 3 years now here. This is the official mailbag show for Player Profiler. So welcome in, ask your questions away, drop a comment. But let's go ahead and dive right in. Training camp news, I'm going to not go through right now because obviously training camp and preseason is over. And the information, it's rapidly coming in, like, the trade of Adam Thielen, the suspension of Rashee Rice, Joe Mixon on the pup. We're going to go over a lot of this as I go through these draft strategy and tips. So we're just going to go ahead and dive right in, right? The first thing that I wanted to start off with in terms of these last minute cram sessions here is we have to identify real injury problems that could actually linger versus the ones that we don't really need to worry about, right? So the first one that I want to start off with, the big one here, is going to be the San Francisco 49ers, because we got a lot going on here in terms of identifying how do we approach this 49ers receiving core, right? Oddly enough, last season we were all panicked and trying to figure out what to do with CMC. We have very little concerns about the running back room now, especially with the addition there of the nice backup in Brian Robinson. Sorry to those who had already drafted Brian Robinson, but it's not the running back room we're concerned about. We're trying to figure out what is going on with these pass catchers over here. Brandon Ayuk, obviously, we were given a timeline on here. I talked about this in last week's show, I believe, but we were given a rough timeline. Please do not take that as gospel. Like, the exact quote was like, yeah, week 6, but I mean, it could be 5, could be 10. I don't really know. They don't have an exact timeline. Now, good news. He's out there and he's physically running. So this is not a situation of where we're massively concerned that we're not going to see him this season. We're going to see him. I think that week 6 is kind of the at best situation. A mid-season return is very realistic. You can buy the dip if you want, but just realize you are holding on to an asset that you're not going to be able to use for a while. So don't do this if you don't have IR spots, because you were waiting a minimum of 6 weeks, right? And even at that, like, let's compare it to the Rashee Rice situation, right? Where we know we're missing 6 weeks. So the difference between that is that Rice is coming off of an injury from last year, but if he could go in week 1, he would go, right? We don't have concerns. He's out there. He's good to go. The recovery is good. There's no ramp up time needed. So there's 6 weeks, and then he immediately goes onto the field with no kind of ramp up time. Now, obviously, you've got a guy, he'll be practicing in some sort of capacity. He's suspended, but he'll be working out in some sort of capacity. So perhaps you do get like a week of like, okay, let's get him out there for 50% of snaps, but no significant timeline in terms of ramp up. With Brandon Ayuk, the way that we need to look at it is that we are going to have ramp up time. He's not going to get out there on the field and all of a sudden be at an 80% snap count. I would not expect that. We'll have lower strategic usage for him to ramp up and really come into his own in the back half of the season. So just be aware. Continue to lean into George Kittle and Ricky Pearsall. Again, this is a weird situation that we've got going on here, not just with Brandon Ayuk, but also Jawan Jennings, right? We've got Jawan Jennings, who is technically dealing with a calf injury, but It sounds like it's more like a contract injury, right? We know that he is in theory in question for week 1, and it's a weird situation because it's one of those things where we don't know, like a Devontae Adams situation where he had the hamstring injury last year, which was really just a I don't want to be here in Vegas kind of situation to get himself traded to the Jets. So Juwan Jennings is kind of going through the same thing on a much smaller scale, right? Because he's not Devontae Adams, but he's not happy over his contract because he feels like what he put up last year is worthy of getting higher pay. And it's a weird situation because you'd think they would have something worked out right now. He doesn't have a ton of leverage in terms of other teams more than likely wanting to trade him and give him a giant contract, right? But he does have leverage in terms of the fact that the 49ers receiving core is literally Ricky Pearsall right now. Everybody else is injured. I think Jacob Cowing did return to practice. Maybe that might have been, I don't know if that was him, actually. That might have been another running back for the 49ers that returned to practice. James, I believe, was the one. But Cowing is dealing with an injury. We've got Demarcus Robinson, who was looking like he was going to be the third starter, out with the 3-game suspension. So Juwan Jennings, in terms of trying to force them into adjusting the contract, does have that level of leverage. So it's kind of a weird situation where realistically he could make them sweat out week 1 or 2 in order to force a contract situation. So pay attention to that. But at the end of the day, regardless, between Jennings and Pearsall has always been my preferred target. Jennings obviously had that amazing ceiling game last season for sure. But at the end of the day, we have to look at Ricky Pearsall and understand the 49ers drafted him in the first round with a clear vision for the future. The intention and his lack of production last year, obviously, well, there were some things around that in terms of him getting shot and whatnot, but he didn't really have that ramp up time, obviously, because of being shot. And then he also was dealing with an injury before that as well. So his offseason really didn't happen in terms of the preparation and OTAs that he would have liked to see. So understandably so, his production didn't really happen until the last couple of games of the season. So when you're looking at it, you might think that Jennings is naturally the more so wide receiver 1 there, but I still genuinely believe that it is Ricky Pearsall. And I think where we saw that in preseason, him being that immediate first look for Brock Purdy. And again, I like George Kittle as well. So that's my preference. If you're drafting, try and get Kittle early. It's harder because, again, his ADP has risen up. So you have to be able to time it in a very specific way. But if you don't get Kittle, Pearsall is the direction that I would like to go. But that's the 49ers injury situation. Again, I'm going to go to the comments here. What's up, Albert? From Mar, Pearsall will be a top 10 receiver this year. I like your thinking there. There's some skeptics out there. There's some Ricky Pearsall haters out there. A lot of them in masses that just don't believe. But I kind of get that because I think there were Ricky Pearsall haters before he was even drafted. That people were very skeptical of him and his production in college, and then what he would be in the NFL. I'm more on the positive side of that. I liked him as a prospect, so I'm very much so pro Ricky Pearsall. Let's talk about Joe Mixon as well. We've got another. We'll start off with the painful injury news, right? So Joe Mixon. If you've been drafting him in best ball, I know more than likely if you were drafting in redraft, I hope that you didn't grab shares of him, especially if you've been following me and watching my show. You guys know I have not been pro Mixon, unfortunately. No offense to him, but everything about this injury in the offseason just screamed like red flag, Christian McCaffrey situation where this is a lingering problem that is not going to be dealt with super quick, right? And we got our answer in terms of him going on the NFI list, missing the first 4 weeks. I would operate as if it is going to be more because that first 4 weeks, that's just him going on that list. It could be an extended visit. So when we're looking at this backfield, I do like targeting this backfield a lot, actually, because I think there's good value in it. I know you may not want to, but the Texans, regardless of the offensive line situation, we hope and cross our fingers that they have even halfway solved that problem. But even with the struggles that they had last season, they still provided ample opportunities on the ground for Joe Mixon. So when I'm looking at this backfield this year, we essentially know that Nick Chubb is going to be the starter in week 1, right? And I defend Nick Chubb quite a bit, right? Because his last season production, first of all, the Browns, there was nobody that could really succeed on the ground in that dreadful offense, right? But additionally here, when we're looking at running backs that are coming back mid-season from a major injury, that's never a recipe for good things to happen. They almost always underperform below expectations. It's just more alarming with Chubb because we're so used to seeing him be at another level. And at the same time, he has he's aged, right? He's up there in years. He's knocking on the door of 30. He'll be there by the end of the season. So when we're looking at that, you do get red flags and you start to get panicked about it. But it is very realistic that he would have better production this season than last season, because often, again, regardless of age, even for the young guys, sometimes it takes a full year to really feel like yourself. We've heard it directly from the backs of guys, from the mouths of guys like Tony Pollard, right? When talking about coming off of those injuries, it's just like, man, I just didn't feel like myself for a while. So when we're looking at Nick Chubb, I think he'll start off the season as the RB1. And his ADP right now, because everyone's got skepticism around him, not a big issue, right? So really, when we're looking at that backfield, if you want to take a stab at him on ADP, that's cool. I'm on board with that. My preferred target, though, is taking that late round stab at Woody Marks. And this is based on the fact that I do think this is going to be a long-term injury for Mixon. And when we're looking at Nick Chubb, 29-year-old running back, we have not seen him have a full Nick Chubb season since 2022. That's very significant. So taking a bet on a young back with fresh legs, a 3-down back, right? Then yeah, that's something that we can absolutely lean into. So Woody Marks is definitely my preferred target there. We might not get that week 1, week 2, week 3 even production, but it's a good little safety valve there for what happens if Nick Chubb really is unfortunately cooked, right? Or struggles to make it through the season because it's been a while. He hasn't handled that workload in a while. So Marks is someone who I do love as a late round target. I'm going to go to the chat here. What's up, Big Bando TV? Let's see. Yeah. We got a question here from Nathan Neely. I plan on getting 2 RB, 2 wide receiver with my first picks. That is the ideal plan. That's my preferred plan. We'll talk about that here in a second as well. But how do you feel about going with one of the big 3 tight ends? And if I did that, my preference there would be, and you could still work it in, but my preference there, if you did that, would probably be to, obviously, you're absolutely going to fade quarterback in that situation and wait a little bit later. My preference would probably be to go with the 2 running backs and a tight end. Bowers and McBride, I do love, and especially Bowers, man, especially because the ADP is not too egregious now. Sometimes he's slipping into the later second, depending on how your lead mates feel. I'm good with all 3 of them. Kittle is my preferred just because I like to wait on the last guy in there, get that, same value. He has exactly the same ceiling as Bowers, a higher ceiling than McBride because McBride doesn't have that, heavy touchdown equity as well. So Kittle is my preferred target, but any 3 of them, I'm perfectly fine with taking. That's my cutoff there. I'm very much so. My draft strategy with tight ends this season is we're going for the big 3, and then we're waiting until we get to Tyler Ward or Tucker Kraft. Maybe you can go with the Mark Andrews, because the ADP is dipping just a little bit on him. But for the most part, I am okay with waiting and just investing in running backs and wide receivers and maybe even like a, early quarterback as well, just because that middle group there, the value for them is kind of a mismatch there. Another comment here from Mar. Who is the best handcuff running back in your view? Ironically, let's talk about handcuff running backs here for a second, because that was actually one of the main category draft tips that I have, choosing the right handcuffs here. Because we've had a lot of changes in terms of handcuffs, right? So Marshawn Lloyd going on IR, that means that generally speaking, we can get low value in terms of the handcuff situation now, but I would not try and buy any kind of dip on Marshawn Lloyd. Ollie Gordon, I think, is the preferred handcuff over Jalen Wright in Miami. We talked about Woody Marks being a late handcuff that I love targeting. But if I'm looking up and down the list of all the handcuffs, kind of independent of ADP value, right? Because that plays into it a lot. I would probably say that my preferred handcuff is to lean into Braylon Allen, just because his ADP is still very reasonable right now. You can get him in right at the cusp of like double-digit rounds in ADP. He's clearly the handcuff there, and then also should have standalone value opposite of Breece Hall here. He's in a very good situation there in New York. It's a run-heavy offense. He can have standalone value there. The only potential downside there that we could see is the competition in terms of goal line carries from Justin Fields, right? But regardless, they're going to be a run-heavy offense, and if anything were to happen to Breece Hall, Braylon Allen would be capable of handling receiving workload as well. It's not as if he has impossible stone hands, right? So we can lean into that one. That's my preferred. But when we're looking at other guys here that offer standalone value as well, I like Jordan Mason. That ADP is very elevated, though. That is the only problem that I have with him, is that because he has, again, finally people are realizing that Jordan Mason has a real role in this offense. People were kind of in denial earlier. It only took Minnesota saying it like 50,000 times for people to say the goal line carries are going to Jordan Mason there, right? It's looking like it's going to be a 50-50 split. Love, obviously, I'm wearing a Packers shirt. You can't see it. I always wear my Packers shirt on the podcast, but love Aaron Jones as a fan. And unfortunately, I just can't get behind him this season because he was coming off his heaviest workload on the ground of his entire career, which is kind of insane. Minnesota kind of botched the usage there in terms of leaning into him so aggressively on the ground. Now, granted, his body held up. That's cool. But the year coming off of that type of workload where you've had a significant workload compared to your prior workload, that's a major problem, right? So Jordan Mason, ADP being very, very elevated, right? You're paying a hefty price for him, but he can stumble into a significant workload there if Aaron Jones were to go down with an injury. Trey Benson as well is another one there that is very interesting to me. Zach Charbonnet, the offense, the running. So I'm a big Kenneth Walker, right? Love him, love his fit in the offense. Very much so pro Kenneth Walker. From a hand, he is dealing with a little like soreness in his foot, I believe. We might want to pay attention to that, to just kind of like, there's not a lot of details on it. I'm going to operate as no news is good news, that it's not a major issue. But if there were anything were to happen to him, Zach Charbonnet is the direct handcuff there, and he also fits that offensive scheme very, very well. So I'm very excited for the run game in Seattle this season. Looks like the offensive line did improve. I was a little bit skeptical. Consistently, they've been one of the worst ranked offensive lines. I mean, across the board, PFF, not just my own random opinion there. General consensus is that they didn't do enough in the offseason, but they look much better in preseason there. The run game looked fantastic, so I'm super excited about any running back in that system. Ray Davis is another one. If something were to happen to James Cook, we want these high upside handcuffs that are in great offenses, right? So when we look at Ray Davis, yes, look at what James Cook did last season. Yes, Josh Allen does garner a lot of carries at the goal line. Regardless, James Cook got his just because that offense is so incredible. So Ray Davis for sure. Brian Robinson, we cannot overlook. Kyle Shanahan essentially said, like, we don't have to worry about, what happens if CMC goes down. Does Isaac Guerrero slip in? We've got other running backs there. I mean, it was pretty clear that Shanahan was very direct in saying that's our number 2 right there. So I consider Brian Robinson an extremely high upside handcuff because anybody can run in San Francisco. That's what we've seen year after year. Next man up when someone gets hurt. That's always the first guy off waivers you grab. He gives you an RB1 performance. It is what it is. So Brian Robinson, despite being a little inefficient last year in Washington, would have really good upside in San Francisco's offense. Tyler Algier, obviously. Will Shipley is also someone that I love. And then Taj Brooks, just because super pro Chase Brown. I do not think that Brooks is going to sneak in and take volume away from him. But I just don't believe that there's any other body in that running back room that would really step up and garner a significant amount of workload. So Brooks has looked good this offseason. If Chase Brown were to go down, Brooks has 3 down back capabilities, and that's what you need in that offense, right? To succeed, you need to be able to catch some balls from Joe Burrow. So those are all the guys that I have marked as my preferred handcuffs there. Oh, Big Vando commented that it's his first year in Dynasty. Perfect, because we do a lot of Dynasty talk here on this podcast. So if you have any Dynasty questions, ask away. I'm pretty excited about a couple of my Dynasty teams this year. In particular, one where I've got Drake May in 2 leagues there. I've gotten younger at quarterback because I might have been relying on Matt Stafford as a QB2 a lot. So I made a very good effort over the past couple of drafts to get a lot younger at quarterback here. So I'm excited about these young quarterbacks here. Yeah, you've got a great little squad there. Great squad. What's up, Jerry Nelson? Junik, yes, I would answer trade questions as well. So if you got any, fire away. Getting back to the injury stuff that we need to pay attention to in our little cram session here. The next one, and I'll do this one real quick. Darnell Mooney, because I did a video talking about him if you want to check it out on my YouTube channel. But usually when I'm talking about injury guys, we're talking about avoiding them because we don't want to draft guys that are dealing with injuries. But Darnell Mooney's ADP has dropped stupidly. He's sitting like an RB 50 or running back, wide receiver 50 something. At this point, there's 0 risk. Again, this is a guy who had almost 1,000, like 8 yards short of 1,000 yards last season with Kirk Cousins at quarterback. 5 touchdowns is not impressive. But when you consider the fact that, again, he is a wide receiver too, and Cousins threw like a depressing amount of touchdowns compared to interceptions, nearly equal. I mean, my God, right? The opportunity here in this offense, and really that's, why we love this offense as a whole, why we're sitting there drafting within the first 2 rounds. Both Bijan, as a potential overall first pick, and then swinging around at the end of the first, beginning of the second, and grabbing Drake London and feeling super comfortable about that because the pass volume is there in the Atlanta offense. It is just a matter of Michael Penix just being more efficient. That's all you got to do. You just got to be more efficient. Don't turn the ball over. Have some improved accuracy. Be less careless. And there can be some significant uptick in volume and touchdown equity within this Atlanta receiving core. So Darnell Mooney, very interesting little pick there as well, since we're getting good value on him for sure. Checking out the chat there from Morshed Sharif. Do you think we should go running backs early this year or wait on them? This is one of my biggest draft strategy tips this season. I am typically very much so pro hero RB. I love to grab my guy in the first or second round, preferably, and then I would typically wait much later until I get into, low-end RB3s, high-end RB4s, and try to find those good value picks. That's been my preference for years. I love to lean into heavy wide receiver builds. I have gone the opposite this year. I'm very much so robust running back this year. And the reason for that really is that, unfortunately, there's kind of this weird situation where when we're looking at running backs 1 through like 17, 18 or so, depending on how, your opinions are, right? You got a lot of great options in terms of being able to snag and go to so many different directions and grab a legitimate RB1, right? After that, things start to get very shaky. You get into a situation where, when you look at those low-end RB2s, I still like them. That you got guys like Travion Henderson and RJ Harvey, very high upside plays, right? That you would love to draft as your RB2. If you're leaning in them as an RB1, you start to get a little bit nervous here. So I like to pair those guys up with a running back that I draft earlier. By the time we hit RB 25, my recommendation is that you have 2 running backs. Do not delay. Do not try to go 0 RB. If you're going a hero RB strategy, you better dip into that last stitch effort range. Tony Pollard is probably last call. Isaiah Pacheco in terms of ADP. So when you get right there to that point, everything after that gets very uncomfortable. Then you start to look at guys like I mentioned, Aaron Jones, who is losing all his goal line work. Tyrone Tracy, who I do think is going to retain that lead running back role there, but I don't know how effective it will be in an offense. Now he does have the receiving upside, right? But I don't know how effective it will be in an offense that is playing from behind a lot, has an incredibly daunting schedule. I like Malik Neighbors in there just because, again, pure volume, they're going to have to pass a lot. It does not bode well for the running backs. And you get to guys like Caleb Johnson, who a lot of people are looking at is like saying, he's going to have a breakout season. He's going to have to earn that. So if you're trying to rely on him as your RB2 earlier in the season, it's not going to be very comfortable, right? You got into a range where there's just a lot of committees, unfortunately. And my preference there is to go heavy running back early, because you have the ability, right? It's kind of crazy when you can sit there and you can draft a Bijan Robinson, and then you can come around 5 rounds later and grab Alvin Kamara, right? And you can do that. You've got your 2 lead backs with legitimate top 5 upside, right? My preference there is to lean heavily into those top 20-ish, if you want to push it to 24, that's cool. Lean heavily, grab 2 running backs from there. And that is the best strategy to go with there, because it gets kind of ugly. Unfortunately, it just gets into a situation where you're going to be taking a lot of chances there. From Jerry Nelson. There, will Travion Henderson move in front of Stevenson in touches? It might take a little bit, but I do have a little bit more confidence after preseason in Henderson, just because, again, as I'm sure all of you have been traumatized by the New England backfield in the days of Josh McDaniels at offensive coordinator. This is no mystery. We know exactly what we're getting. There should not be any question, right? Now, I will say, obviously, we have seen him in a situation like in Vegas where he did have a lead back, but you kind of feel like that was more of a force situation, right, with Josh Jacobs. When we look at the Patriots, I do feel like they're going to commit to a committee. But I think Travion Henderson has enough upside to where we don't have to worry about it from a fantasy perspective. At a baseline bare minimum, just based off the pass catching upside and how effective he can be in it, because he is truly an electric player, we should be looking at a nice baseline of 10 fantasy points per game. So I trust him. Oddly enough, I do trust him. I think that he will move in front of Stevenson in terms of touches. It just might take us a second to get there. But in the meantime, you'll still be able to start him as a low-end RB2 or flex option because of that receiving upside that he has. I do expect Drake May to utilize him in the pass game. They would be crazy. Now, granted, it's the Patriots and Josh McDaniels, so it is sometimes crazy. But they would, in fact, be crazy to not utilize him to his fullest potential there. I think he's different, right? And I like Ramondre Stevenson. I was very much so, tried to be fluid with the New England backfield, right, in the past. So pro Ramondre Stevenson in the past, but Travion Henderson is he's different, right? And this is the type of player that can force them just to commit to him as the lead back than forcing a committee. I'm going to show a comment here from Morshed Sharif. I really appreciate that. Commented that followed my advice 2 years ago and won your league. That is amazing. That makes me happy. I like, so every single Sunday, because I do live start sits, and I'll do that this year. I'll have some live start sit shows on, I think Twitch, the Fantasy Pros Twitch for at the beginning-ish of the season, and then on social media as well. Anyway, they're going to be live streams answering start sit questions. And one of my favorite things is Q&A, live Q&A, start sits and stuff like that. And when I think about throughout the day as I'm watching the games, I'm not thinking about my fantasy teams. I care about them, but my biggest concern is making sure that I was right on the information that I told everyone, because I want you guys to win. So it'll be a fun season. So guys, stick around, stick around. Getting back to some of the injury stuff. Isaiah Likely, I know it doesn't seem like a big one because, again, from a fantasy perspective, last year he gave us that nice, massive boost at the beginning of the season, and then really, truly wasn't that fantasy relevant other than just nuking Mark Andrews after that. But it is very valuable, right, that he does have this early season injury in terms of perhaps setting the tone for Mark Andrews. So Likely didn't go on the pup, but it still feels like a stretch for him to be available in week 1. My perspective is that if we get Mark Andrews with a tight end 1 share immediately, when Isaiah Likely comes back, he'll still be involved because he was always involved. But we'll see more of that Mark Andrews that we saw at the back half of the season. When you think about the season as a whole, we remember the first half, which was just like the first 6 or so games, which was a nightmare. It felt like we were being stabbed in the fantasy heart by the lack of production that we were getting out of Mark Andrews. And we remember that. But the back half of that season, the man was fire. Touchdowns at a ridiculous rate. He actually ended up with the highest production of any tight end in the red zone, the highest fantasy production. And it was not even close because every single week he was getting touchdown after touchdown after touchdown. Touchdown regression is obviously real, but when we look at Andrews, it's less of an issue for him because touchdowns have always been a part of his game, but he is one of the first 2 looks within the offense, right? And Zay Flowers obviously is, somebody who can commit, give us volume, but he doesn't really contribute significantly in the red zone in the way that Mark Andrews does. So I think we're getting a bargain on Andrews. Of those guys that are kind of sitting in no man's land at tight end, that's the one that kind of turns my head a little bit there, particularly with this injury to Isaiah Likely. Let's talk about some injuries that you should not be concerned about. They should not affect your draft strategy at all. Khalil Shakir, Tera McMillan. Those things should not affect where you are drafting them. Do not drag them down. Khalil Shakir returned to practice. It's a high ankle sprain. It's very straightforward, right, in terms of timeline and expectations. He could play in week 1, and if not, probably week 2. So don't panic over that. McMillan's hamstring injury doesn't seem like a major issue. Jaden Reed returned to practice. Yay. Just bear in mind, word out of Green Bay is that Golden is looking like he could be the lead receiver right off the bat. That's what I'm hearing. And it makes sense, right? Because and I've targeted both of them, really tried to cover it at an equal rate, but my preference there is Matthew Golden, just because when you look at that Packers receiving core, they have to lean into Matthew Golden because he has the clear and by far best hands on the team. It's not even close. Well, Tucker Kraft being excluded, but when we're looking at the receiving core there, the most reliable receiver, and he has not even stepped on the field yet, is Matthew Golden in terms of just a guy that you can trust to actually reach out and catch a ball and not try to catch it with your body and drop it very embarrassingly. So, but Jaden Reed, good news. Again, low ADP on him if you're drafting him. Not a panic over there. He should be potentially on track for week 1. Jordan Love, obviously, the thumb, he practiced. It's on the non-throwing hand. It's not a major issue there. Najee Harris. Now, this one is interesting. So, Amari Hampton jumped significantly in rankings. I did not massively move him. I moved him a little bit. But Najee Harris has a chance to play in week 1, which is interesting because they were being, so very vague, right, in terms of talking about him. But in his injury and his timeline, right? But it's looking like he could be. It's possible week 1. So if he's available early in the season, we have to remember that he is a running back that coaches love. They do want to utilize multiple backs there. So just kind of be aware when you're looking at Amari and Hampton. Volume, they want to be slightly run heavy there. But we did see an uptick in pass volume from Justin Herbert. So the offense is a little bit more balanced than you would feel it would be at first glance there. So just be careful. I would look at him as someone you're drafting as an RB2, not an RB1. Jumping to the chat here real quick. Comment from Dennis. It is setting up to be another stellar Jacobs season. Yeah. And I've had my concerns about, not concerns about production, right? Because the volume is going to be there, especially early, I think. As this Green Bay pass offense tries to find itself, more than likely they're going to continue to lean heavily into Josh Jacobs, particularly early. My only concern with Jacobs was that last time he did have a hefty workload last season. And last time that we saw him have a hefty workload in Vegas, the next season, he did not look like himself because it was aggressive. His body was overworked. He just looked a little bit less efficient and was dealing with some nagging injuries. And that happens a lot after guys come in off of heavy workloads. But I will say that was the season where he had over 340 carries. He did not have that many this past season, so it might not be an issue here. But I do feel especially comfortable. His ADP is not egregious or anything like that. So we should get a heavy dose of Josh Jacobs early. From Jerry Nelson, would you draft Tyler Warren in front of Evan Ingram? I would. I don't have it. So rankings are funny. I don't have it ranked that way in particular, just because, well, do I? Actually, I don't have my rankings in front of me. I can check real quick. I've got, because my internet is not that bad. I have Evan Ingram at tight end 8. Now, what I will say is that in a perfect world, Evan Ingram is the exact tight end that Sean Payton has been looking for. That's a perfect world. In a non-perfect world, the Broncos have had the most abysmal usage and target share to the tight end position of nearly any franchise over the past couple of years. And part of that is probably due to not having their guy, but it is a little bit of a risk. I think the safer pick, honestly, despite him being a rookie, that I would prefer is to skip over Evan Ingram and take the value on Tyler Warren. I love Tyler Warren this season. To me, he is one of my favorite value plays, right? In terms of guys that are well underpriced for where they should be in terms of ADP. He has such a realistic path to being the first look in this offense. I love and roster Michael Pittman. I want the best for him. I like Josh Downs. And honestly, Josh Downs does profile-wise should fit very well with Daniel Jones. So that quarterback situation was definitely a benefit to him. But Tyler Warren, I think, truly has a path to at least be the second look on this team and possibly to the first. I'm not calling him Brock Bowers, but if any tight end, any rookie tight end has a Brock Bowers pathway this year, it's definitely Tyler Warren. So he is one of my preferred targets. I absolutely would skip right over Evan Ingram and go straight to Tyler Warren for sure. Gotten a lot of Tyler Warren shares. Love, since I wasn't able to get any dynasty shares, since all my league mates were haters and blocked me from getting my Tyler Warren. I'm particularly bitter about one league where I have Travis Kelce, and I was like, I need Tyler Warren or Colston Loveland, and they blocked me. They knew. And I hope they're watching. I know what you did. Chat from going to the chat from Mar. Do you think TJ Hawkinson will return to form with a new quarterback? Yeah, and that's another one that gets maybe a little bit of a injury pass as well. The only issue with TJ Hawkinson, and yes, I'm good with TJ Hawkinson. I think he'll look fine this year. I think the ADP, not my favorite. Again, I skip over those mid-round guys just because I think there's better value there, particularly at wide receiver in that range. The only problem I have with Hawkinson, and it won't be a problem at the beginning of the season because we've got Jordan Addison suspended for 3 games. But my only problem with TJ Hawkinson is that when everybody is healthy, he is the third look in that offense. But I have no concerns about JJ McCarthy. We are very pro JJ McCarthy over here. Oh yeah, pro JJ McCarthy. It's going to be a good season here. The weapons that he has in that offense, it's just ridiculous there. So I've got no concerns that McCarthy is going to be an issue for TJ Hawkinson. It's just that target share probably won't be what we ideally want it to be, but I think he'll be fine. nice and stable, a guy who we can rely on a weekly basis. Ceiling might just be a bit capped because we can't get to that where we'd like to have him in that range of like a TJ Hawkinson perfect form is where he's getting 10 targets, right? I don't know if we'll get there just based off the volume that he'll have to compete with from Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. Addison, real, and you know, on the subject, Jordan Addison is one of my preferred targets for value draft strategy right there for sure. Just because we knew the 3-game suspension was coming. The suspension was already baked into his ADP for some reason. People are continuing to punish him even more now that the suspension was announced. We're getting a massive discount on Jordan Addison there. You can make it 3 games. Suck it up. It's not a big deal. You can make it 3 games. And then when he comes back, you've got a locked in wide receiver 2 there. This is a guy who, if he did not have the suspension, he should ideally be drafted around Jameson Williams. Those are my 2 guys that I like to comp together in terms of guys that are on high volume pass offenses. They have a wide receiver ahead of them that they can't overtake, right? But they're in such an excellent position as a second look in that offense to truly thrive, and they have big play, touchdown equity there. So love them both. The dip in ADP that we get from Jameson Williams to Jordan Addison, the gap should not be that big. So that's one of my preferred ones to target there. Circling back to any injury news there. Where did we leave off there? We talked about Najee Harris. The other ones that I wanted to talk about was Matt Stafford. Matt Stafford, the way that you're approaching it. So one, we're not drafting him, so it's not an issue in terms of guys like it. That's a full fade for me because when you get around that range at quarterback, I mean, even if you're in Superflex, you just got so many options that you can go with. You can go with in that range. JJ McCarthy has gone up a little bit, but when you get in that range, you can look at a Jordan Love, a Trevor Lawrence, a Bryce Young. You could even go further back with a Geno Smith. Matt Stafford, love him to death, but this is a pain management situation that's going to linger throughout. It's not going away. It's going to linger throughout the entire season. You don't want to draft a guy who has a nagging injury that it's just going to be there the entire season. Now, when we're looking at Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams, that's where I have a little minor dip in my rankings on Puka Nacua. He's still a top 10 wide receiver for me, but in terms of guys that I'm drafting in the first round, I far prefer Amon-Ra St. Brown over him. I prefer Malik Neighbors over him. Puka falls back there. I mean, honestly, when I'm looking at it, I kind of say, okay, let me bypass Puka and let me get a Drake London. Let me get a Brian Thomas here because they're in just such more, well, technically speaking, New York's not a stable situation, but the pass volume funnel is just so aggressive. I also think that we underestimate the impact that Devontae Adams is going to have there as well in terms of the volume there. Going to the chat here. Oh, this is a good question. I never get this question. We never get Kyler Murray questions here. From Larry M. Why does nobody ask about Kyler Murray? How do you feel about Kyler and Harrison Jr. this year? Also, are there guys you're taking over Harrison? So yes, there's one. Well, let's do first. I feel better about them. I'm still very skeptical of the coaching staff there in terms of their offensive vision, because for me, Kyler Murray didn't have any issues last season. They were just kind of holding him in a special little box. And the way that they utilized Marvin Harrison Jr., it just was a weird situation that I don't think was on Kyler or Marvin Harrison Jr. My hope is that the coaching staff looked at that and said, we took a poor approach there, and the results were mediocre on the field. And we can't put out another mediocre season here. That's when you start to talk about job security and whatnot. They have to lean into Kyler and let him actually target and utilize Marvin Harrison Jr. in a more varied way. Judging based off how he has looked in terms of utilization in the offseason and OTAs, I think we're going to see an improvement here. And I'm very comfortable with the ADP that we have on him. What I will say is that I do have a couple of other people over him that I would take over him, that maybe is a little bit against consensus. And this will probably change because of the contract. Obviously, more people might be on board, but Terry McLaurin is obviously one here. I know people are like mildly skeptical of Terry McLaurin's production last season, but again, when it's tied directly to a quarterback, you have to believe in it. And the addition of Deebo Samuel does not affect the volume that Terry McLaurin was getting. They're just a perfect complement to each other. I love Deebo Samuel this year. I love him in this offense. And I love both of them. So I would take Terry McLaurin over Marvin Harrison Jr. and Courtland Sutton. That's the big one for me. And I have to defend Courtland Sutton a little bit because sometimes I get mad as I'm scrolling through social media and see Courtland Sutton slander. And I want to jump in and argue, but I don't do that. I don't squabble on the timelines, but I will defend Courtland Sutton significantly here. When people look at Courtland Sutton, they're looking at the season as a whole. They're not looking at his season in the context of Bo Nix specifically. So when we're looking at Courtland Sutton, we have to remember, yes, his average as a whole in terms of where he finished in fantasy points per game, wide receiver 23 in half PPR, that does not tell the whole story of the season there. We have to remember that Bo Nix actually got off to a terrible start, not in terms of fantasy value because he had upside significantly on the ground that saved him, but in terms of passing, he struggled for like 4 weeks there before he really found himself and started to do well. He broke out in week 5. If you segment it down from week 5 through the end of the season, Courtland Sutton was wide receiver 17 in average points per game and half PPR. Then if you kind of consider, okay, Nix continued to progress, let's look at the back half of the season. In the back half of the season, Courtland Sutton was wide receiver 8 in average fantasy points per game. The season as a whole can look underwhelming, but when you pinpoint the back half of the season where Bo Nix really, really came into his own, where he looked like the quarterback that Sean Payton believed that he could be, the offense was just gelling. They were making that aggressive push there for the playoffs. He looked like a completely different player. That was where the connection between him and Courtland Sutton just truly, truly thrived. And I expect that to continue this year. Again, I like Evan Ingram. I like Marvin Mims. I like Pat Bryant. But at the end of the day, the wide receiver 1, the guy that is going to have the hefty target share there, is Courtland Sutton. Sometimes we try to get too cute. I saw comments of people saying that Marvin Mims is just going to be a significant threat to Courtland Sutton's target share. That seems like a reach to try and pull back a guy that ADP currently on Courtland Sutton is wide receiver 22 and half PPR. Guys, you're getting a significant value right there for a wide receiver 1. So Sutton is someone that I lean into. From Nathan Neely, Sutton or Ridley. I do like Ridley, but it is Sutton for me that I draft over him. But that's not a negative towards Ridley whatsoever. I'm pro Ridley as well. That's another one of my favorite ADP value picks as well. He does not have that same top 10 upside that I think Courtland Sutton has, and that's probably just kind of a touchdown thing in overall offensive situation. We got to remember when we look at Denver, sometimes people say the defense is going to be so good, they're just going to run the ball. Realistically, that's not what teams do. What that does for a team that has a very competent quarterback means that he is going to be more efficient. That's the kind of play that you see from a guy like Brock Purdy, who doesn't have aggressive pass volume, but is just very, very efficient when the team is gelling as a whole. The defense is working, right? So that's kind of a similar situation that we'll see in Denver, except honestly a little bit better. We're looking at that defense. It's going to be putting them in a situation where they're not passing from a panic, right? Bo Nix is going to be comfortable. The offensive line is strong. So when we're looking at that situation, because I know a lot of people fear second year regression, right? I don't see that happening for Bo Nix. So I feel very good about that situation as a whole. By the way, I do like the running backs, RJ Harvey. J.K. Dobbins, for the ADP, it's not that bad if you want to take a chance on him. But ultimately, I do think that the higher upside and the guy that should be a little bit more reliable long term, obviously with Dobbins' injury history, Harvey. I do love him. From Armando Hernandez, Trey Harris or Pat Bryant. This one is tough for me. I like them both. Trey Harris is interesting because Keandre Lambert-Smith has looked fantastic. And part of me wonders if he ends up kind of outplaying Trey Harris. And then when I look at Pat Bryant, obviously he's sitting there and he's competing with Marvin Mims, who to his credit did finish off the season very strong. We're supposed to get a little bit increased volume from Troy Franklin, who looked good this offseason. And then Pat Bryant looked like an absolute monster in preseason. One of the top performing rookies between him and Isaac Tesla. They just looked fantastic. My preference there is to lean towards Trey Harris, just because I think we should at least see a situation where maybe he has a little bit less competition. I know Keenan Allen was added there, but I think, Keenan Allen is somebody who they were adding just, again, older veteran, stable option, can be very versatile as well. It's close for me. I know I'm waffling back and forth. I lean Harris, but man, part of me wants to say Bryant on that one. I love them both. If you can snag them both, yeah, I hate to decide between them. That was the most waffling answer that I have given all season because no one's asked me that one, and that threw me off, and I've never processed which one I actually prefer because I do like them both. Sorry, you got me so nervous there. My voice is cracking. Moving back to some of the injury stuff as well. And guys, continue to drop your comments. We'll wrap things up here in about 10 minutes or so. But moving back to some of the injury stuff, Miami is one that I really do want to point out. Tyreek Hill doesn't seem like that oblique injury he was dealing with is an issue. Devon Achane, good to go for week 1. Jalen Wright has been dealing with an injury, but regardless, he got outplayed significantly by Ollie Gordon. My perspective there is that he is the better handcuff to own in that offense. Other guys dealing with injuries that we should not be significantly concerned about. Justin Jefferson, I would not have that adjust your perception. Stephon Diggs should be ready for week 1. Again, we talked about Malik Neighbors. The Philadelphia receiving core is dealing with a wide variety of injuries. It does not sound like any of them are significant there, particularly for A.J. Brown. One that I did want to point out as well, because we get a lot of Emeka Egbuka questions, a lot. Chris Godwin not going on the PUP, but not playing week 1. The expectation is that he is going to be ready for October, and that we should see some kind of ramp up time period, right? And it's good news that, they want him out there practicing, getting ready, and maybe potentially ready before that 4-week time period. I will caution you because Emeka Egbuka's ADP is still fine, so I don't mind investing in him, especially since we got the Jalen McMillan injury. So when we're looking at 3 wide receiver sets, we know for sure that Emeka is going to be the guy that's out there. Not that McMillan was challenging him, but that maybe he just might work in a little bit that would just be kind of irritating in terms of the highest upside in terms of usage for Emeka. But my preference there still is to lean into Emeka Egbuka. Godwin's offseason injury, the second surgery, it just seems like it was more of an issue than we really knew about here. So I get worried about drafting somebody coming off of that significant injury. I just still kind of lean towards Emeka. But I will reiterate this. All of this talk of Godwin versus Emeka, everyone's ignoring the fact that Mike Evans is the one who truly benefits from all of this in terms of him being the clear wide receiver one of that offense, going to have heavy volume there. Again, this is an offense that is going to throw a ton, and the ADP discount that we're getting on him, you're able to draft him in round 4, like people. Yeah, we can take the value on a Mecca, but Mike Evans is someone who really, really presents strong value in early rounds. Question from Nathan. How do you feel about going with a top defense, Broncos, Texans, Steelers, and or a kicker like Bates, Aubrey, Dicker, rounds 12/13 instead of 13/14 if you're in position to get them? My preference is to not do it. A lot of times I never like to be the first one off the board. If I start to see a little run, maybe, but at the end of the day, more than likely, I'm going to be streaming a defense. I will say I do prefer to get at least a top 12 kicker. But getting one of the top 3, top 5 isn't 100% necessary for me. So I'm on the edge of just waiting a little bit on that because I do prefer a nice streaming option at I guess I prefer the grind when it comes to streaming defenses in particular. Fun question from Dennis Rodriguez. Are you excited about the Tigers this year? I think Klubnik ends up going QB2 in the draft of 2026. Oh my gosh, yeah. I need that. I need that because I know y'all have noticed Clemson players are down bad this year. My God. Christian Wilkins, Hunter Renfrow got cut. The only thing that we can lean on is T. Higgins, and then we're hoping for, Trevor Lawrence bounce back to kind of, give us something. Like, man, we're so down bad. I need Cade to get a nice high draft pick and give me something to hope for, right? Because I love to see my players transition into the NFL. And we went through a nice little time period where we were just pumping out the receivers, right? And it was like, the riches. And now it feels like we're poverty in terms of putting out the talent in the NFL. And I need something. I need something. So he needs to come through. We can't even talk about Deshaun. Like it's just, yeah. Well, no. This Saturday game it's got me so nervous because we got to start off strong. We need to start off with a win, at very least a good showing here. We got a lot to prove here. So, man, I hate that we always start the seasons off with just these juggernaut of meaningful ranked games here. But wrapping things up here, the only other injury that we need to pay attention to is that, and I talked about Tony Pollard a little bit, is the Tyjae Spears injury. The man just can't stay healthy. It is what it is. At this point, when we're looking at Tyjae Spears, he's going on the PUP 4 weeks. It's significant here. It's just a major red flag here. Tony Pollard, when Tyjae Spears is on the field, his upside is capped, right? He's the RB1 in that offense, but Spears just pokes in enough to make it really irritating and limits his ceiling significantly. When Spears is not on the field, he was perfect last year. Good volume, not a major issue. So he should see a ridiculous amount of volume. I feel comfortable with him. And at the end of the day, a man that can't stay on the field can't have the trust of his coaching staff. So it makes me feel so much more comfortable with Tony Pollard this year. Volume is key for him. Volume is key. Some more draft tips to kind of close things out. We talked about those, and honestly, you guys were awesome with the questions. So we hit on a lot of this stuff. We talked about identifying those value plays at ADP. You guys mentioned, I talked about Cortland Sutton, Ricky Pearsall, Tyler Warren, Calvin Ridley, Chase Brown. These are guys, Alvin Kamara, these are guys who you got to find those undervalued plays and make sure that you are grabbing them because they're so undervalued that you can draft them around early to make sure that you snag them because the value is so good on those guys and the upside is excellent. So lean into those value plays. Don't like tiptoe around them, right? My other recommendation here as we're closing things out, because we talk a lot about sleeper picks. Do not get too cute with sleeper picks, please. I love guys like Kyle Williams, Pat Bryant, Bashal Tootin, Jaden, even Jaden Blue, Ollie Gordon. These are guys that have the potential to step into league-winning situations, right? Not Pat Bryant, really, but it's since Cortland's son. But these are guys Jaden Higgins, guys that have the ability to step into genuine volume, right? The problem here that I see a lot with people is we start to get cute because we're all tuned in and we're dynasty brain and we got sleeper picks and whatnot. We start stacking those sleeper picks and we end up doing something like drafting a Kyle Williams over a Deebo Samuel. And by the time our sleeper picks hit, our teams are they're not doing so good and your path to the playoffs is kind of blocked here. So don't get too cute with your sleeper picks. Make sure that you are not leaning in too aggressively. You're drafting them above ADP, but remember, these are guys that are going to be on your bench. You actually want to be able to have some very viable options, right? So don't get too cute there. Don't let the hype overtake you, right? Speaking of, like hype, the examples of that would be like, last season of Jordan Whittington having a fantastic preseason, thinking that he was going to be the next Puka Nacua. Puka Nacua is on the team, right? So he can't be the next Puka Nacua. Sometimes we fall too in love with our sleeper picks there, anointing a Blake Corum, stealing the job of Kyron Williams when we've got zero evidence of that. So be careful of the hype. Lean into actually realistic breakout potential, right? And do I have any other draft tips? I think that kind of wraps things up there. This was a really good show. You guys had awesome comments here. I'm going to do a couple mailbag questions to close things out. Got a comment from Ride Some Waves there. Harrison Jr. will smash this year. Yeah, we talked about him earlier. We're feeling good about him and Kyler for having a nice bounce back season here. Mailbag question here from Chris Hill at Jackhole1974. Can Breece Hall or Javonte Williams be a viable flex option in half PPR this season? I am pro both. That might surprise you that I'm pro Javonte Williams. I am. I'm getting there, right? With Breece Hall, it's very simple for me. Yes, it's going to be a committee backfield. I talked about Braylon Allen. I truly believe in him in the volume here, but Breece Hall can still get his because even in getting splits in terms of early down work and carries on the ground, he has the clear edge in terms of receiving upside in that offense, right? And it's a run-heavy offense there. So we still feel good about Breece Hall. Would like a little bit more of an ADP discount on him, but not a massive issue there. With Javonte Williams, I'm more pro Javonte Williams than I should be. And that's because it's his job. He's the RB1. It's his job to lose. He's an immediate flex play. He's the only healthy back. So that doesn't hurt right now. Again, when we're even looking long-term, Miles Sanders is not a threat. This is not a pro Miles Sanders podcast by any means. We're pro Chuba Hubbard. You lost your job last season. Chuba Hubbard outperformed you in every way, shape, or form. I don't see a bounce back. I could be wrong, right? Hey, but I don't see Miles Sanders as a threat. Jane Blue, obviously, is interesting. I don't see him as a 3-down back. A nice change of pace back that could play well off of Javonte Williams, but I don't know that he could actually push Williams out completely. And then obviously Phil Maffa, I love as well. But at the end of the day, that's a wee bit of a reach, even though he did look really good in preseason. And also he is the most injured of them all, unfortunately, there. But Javonte will at least have the volume. And when we look at this Cowboys offense, we know one thing. When Dak is on the field and healthy, he gives goal line opportunities. And my God, CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens are out there looking like the Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen of football, right? So it's a good situation for the Cowboys offense. They'll be pushing volume. And if Micah Parsons doesn't come back, they'll also be required to push volume because their defense will be a little underwhelming, unfortunately. I know the Cowboys backfield can make you uncomfortable, but when we're looking at ADP, the good thing about Javonte Williams is that you can use him as a flex option, but when you're drafting him as an RB3 to be on your bench here. So it's not a major investment there. Another mailbag question from someone who was in the chat there. Jerry Nelson, are you still there? Jerry Nelson at FedEx 595. if Myers gets traded, is Thornton a deep sleeper from the Raiders? I'm surprised we didn't get any questions about Dante Thornton. That's surprising, guys. Because I love him. I just put out a video and he's the cover of that video. Regardless of what I don't think Myers is going to get traded. It doesn't make sense for Vegas. Nor do I think that Myers would get teams would be interested, right? Because value wise, and it's weird because I think teams that want to trade him are not looking to give him a contract. So I don't know if this is the situation that he's wanting to create actually. But value wise, I don't think they'll do it. But if he got traded, 100%, it does benefit Thornton. Technically speaking, it would open up opportunities for Jack Bech because Dante Thornton is ahead of Jack Bech in terms of opportunities this year. Thornton is a starter regardless of what happens to Jakobi Meyers. Because again, while Bech had the higher draft pick, his role directly conflicts with Jakobi Meyers. So with Meyers there, the path is just more difficult for him. The Raiders needed somebody as a true deep threat on the outside. Trey Tucker obviously showed well, but they need someone to play opposite of him consistently there. And Thornton stepped up significantly in the offseason, and he is officially a starter there. So Thornton is a sleeper we absolutely want to invest in because the man could have legitimate week one value as a flex play. More than likely, we're not going to recommend it because week one, there's so many options, right? But don't be shocked when he steps out with a 15 to 20 point game in week one because he caught a bomb from Geno Smith. He's a player that, for me, he's very much so Rashid Shaheed in that he is going to get you, he's going to get you 0 fantasy points or he's going to get you 20 because he is such a big play electric threat there. So I love Dante Thornton for sure, grabbing him wherever I can. And then one more question here. Would you go for Samson or mailbag question? Would you go for Samson or Scatabo? This one is a weird, nuanced answer because my answer depends on if they sign Judkins over the next week. And there's no punishment issued from the league. Like it's such a... I was more so leaning into Samson, very pro. I had to take him out of a video because I was going to talk about him as a sleeper because I was very pro Samson. But when the Browns made a cut at running back and they were basically left with Samson and Jerome Ford, it seems like that might indicate that they're on the cusp of signing Quinshon Judkins. So if that happens, it gets a little bit messy, and then we have decreased value for Samson, who could still contribute on third downs, but it just kind of gets into a weird situation. Scatabo's ADP is way too rich for me. I think that it is Tyrone Tracy's backfield, and at the end of the day, it's his job to lose. The other issue with that is that we talked about this. The Giants' schedule is ugly. They're going to be playing from behind. I think, Russ looked good preseason. Jackson Dart looked good preseason. But at the end of the day, I don't think this is a team that is built to compete with the level of schedule that they have to compete with. So they're going to be playing from behind. Run volume is not going to be very awesome there, unfortunately. So I don't like Scatabo at his ADP. But in terms of those between him and Samson, I would lean that direction just because he does have the more direct path in terms of being a direct handcuff to Tyrone Tracy Jr., because I don't think much of Devin Singletary. But that's it, guys. That wraps things up. Thank you for joining in. This was a really live chat. That was awesome. I hope we keep it going throughout the entire season because I will be here with you every single week this season. Next week, oh my God, week 1, we'll be talking about all kinds of stuff in terms of start sit. So get your start sit questions ready for next week. We'll be here Wednesday, 8 p.m. EST. Every single week. But that wraps things up, guys. I appreciate you all tuning in. Again, this is a podcast. Make sure that you are subscribed to the podcast, the Dear Miss Fantasy Show, on all platforms. I would really appreciate that if you're not already subscribed. And then also make sure that you're subscribed to Player Profiler. And if you are not following me or subscribing to me on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, It's Tera Time on all of those platforms. itsteratime, pretty much everywhere. Other than that, if some of you have not drafted yet, good luck this weekend. I've got one left, I think. That's it. And Sunday night, that'll be a fun one. So good luck on all of your drafts. Do well. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them to me literally anywhere on any channel. Appreciate you all tuning in. I will talk to you all next week. Have a good one.
Hey, I want to thank you for being part of this broadcast. If you have any thoughts on it, leave a comment. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like. And if you want to see more shows on the Player Profiler channel, subscribe to it. That's how we know you want more.